Welcome to What's Up With That, a podcast too. The podcast where we explore the intriguing intersections of theology, politics, and religion, and just what's happening in the church. Whether you're a seasoned believer or just God curious, join us as we seek to understand the complexities of faith in today's world and ask, what's up with that? Let's get started. All right, Doc, again, we're so glad you're here. Come on in, man. This is a chair just for you, sir.
Man, I appreciate it.
All right. Glad you're here, man. And we are extremely glad to have you here today. And what I felt to do was introduce our guest today, right? And need folk to understand that our guest today is the one and only Dr. Alexander Goodwin, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas. And again, sir, we're glad that you are here.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Absolutely. On this evening, we're gathering and understanding that you are in political science, and that can cover a broad spectrum as we talk about politics in the world today. On today, however, we had a wonderful conversation a few weeks ago. And so interesting that I thought, hey, that's a good topic for What's Up With That. And that was in the arena of respectability politics.
Yes.
For me, it was a new concept. And while the concept has been around about 30 years, I believe, about 1993-ish?
Yeah, so in 1993, the term was first coined by Evelyn Higginbotham in her book, Righteous Discontent, to describe the behavior and attire and, actions of church-going black women in the South in the late 1890s going into the 1900s. But so respectability politics, the term is about as old as I am. So I'm 29 years old going on 30. But the concept. The concept itself has been around, goes back to my great-grandmother, all of our great-grandparents.
Yeah, and that's what I was beginning to yield to. While it's been around about 30 years, the actual practice of respectability politics has been a part of society and the culture for an extremely long time, and probably predates me. And I'm much older than you.
You still look great.
Bless you, sir. Bless you. But needless to say, it's been around a very long time. And as I begin to think about it, I've got to admit that after our initial conversation, I've engaged in the practice. Completely unaware, however. But I was doing it. I understood that my parents engaged in it, right? So it's something that I can attest to on a personal level, that I was engaging in respectability politics unaware of what it was. Certainly did not have the label, that thing to attach what I was doing to be able to identify it and say, hey,
this is it.
To be able to really name it, right? So it's been around a long time, and ironically, I thought all this time I was being uniquely me. You did briefly touch on the person who coined the term.
Yes.
And can you just once the purpose. Why did she coin that term?
So I'm not quite sure why she decided to go with the term politics of respectability.
But what did it come out of? I mean,
okay. So like it comes out of the black church in the 1890s going into the 1900s. And so if we think about primarily what the stereotypes were of black women at the time, hypersexual, right? Uncivilized, right? These different types of things. So for these church-going black women, this becomes a way to present yourself in public to defy those stereotypes about not only black women, but ultimately this became
Culture.
used by black people at large to, if like someone thinks black men are violent, stupid, these different sorts of things, if I dress up in a shirt or tie or whatever the case happens to be, this might defy that stereotype, right? There's always this like sort of thing in the community of impression management, of the way that you look, the way that you act, the way that you speak, the way that you sound.
Because that's going into what it is. Can we come back there?
Yeah.
I think in that sort of this a little digging. I think it said that she began the process as black women.
Yeah.
To some level sought upward mobility and tried to strip themselves of those negative attributes and negative images that were heaped upon not only women but a black community per se. You're lazy, shiftless, dumb,
violent,
all of those things. So in light of that, then go ahead. What is respectability politics?
So respectability politics most times is this practice. I think black people engage in it and we don't even like realize it in our everyday practice. So when I was in graduate school and I told my buddies I'm studying respectability politics, they're like, what's that? I said, you ever remember when your mom or your grandmother tell you don't wear your do-rag outside the house, or don't go outside, or for black women, don't wear your bonnet outside the house. You look unkempt, you look ghetto, you look X, Y, and Z, right? So it's this idea of, at least in terms of respectability, like tactics of sometimes the way you dress, the way you look, sometimes the way you walk, the way that you talk, right? In terms of in some ways, the whole thing is you're not trying to make the entire race look bad, right? It's this thing that the things that you do, the things that you say, the way you walk, the way that you talk, the way that you carry yourself every moment, this reflects on the race. It's did you ever see the movie Drumline?
Of course.
Right. So you remember when Dr. Lee said, told Devin, he said, if one of us is late, we're all late. If one of us looks and sounds bad, we all look and sound bad. And so it's part of that thing to where at least some, the negative behavior or the loud behavior or what some would consider uncouth behavior of some, or the confirmation of the behavior that confirms negative stereotypes to some, reflects negatively on all of us. Right.
So as we talk about respectability politics, because I think there is the respectability narrative, and respectability politics sort of breeds out of that, right?
Yes.
They embrace the narrative so that they can then perhaps change laws, those kinds of things for the marginalized communities, right? Black folk and perhaps other marginalized communities.
Yes. So respectability has also been used as a tactic as well by, the civil rights movement most famously. So we all, at least most people at this point, know that Rosa Parks wasn't the first person to protest the segregated bus situation in Montgomery, Alabama. There were two others, Claudette Colvin and Susan Smith. Susan Smith ends up not being used as the face of the Montgomery bus boycott. She was, I believe, a pregnant teen and pregnant by an older man in the community. And then the second was Susan Smith, and they didn't use her because everybody knew her father was a town drunk. And so the thought was, if we hold up this person as the sort of forebearer of our movement, this person has these proverbial skeletons in their closet, this will reflect negatively on the entire movement, and people will use this to delegitimize our movement and our cause. So for Rosa Parks, someone like Rosa Parks, she's frankly fair-skinned, married, in her 40s, and
at that time that was old.
right, but in a secretary of the NAACP, and so they're like, she at least, her character at least publicly would be unimpeachable.
When you say publicly, publicly for who?
So for me, I would say publicly, at least, like, the white public would not be able to try to poke proverbial holes in her character to try to delegitimize the broader claims that the civil rights movement, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and Dr. King were making, right? And so this idea of like the perfect victim, right? So if we think back on the last 10 to 12 years with police shootings involving African-American men and women, if we think back to things like Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin or these different people where people, there's always someone, they'll go find old pictures of them with, a grill in their mouth, holding up the middle finger, photos of them smoking weed or different things, try to say, see, this is a thug, this is a...
But who's saying that?
White people.
White people, the dominant culture.
Right.
So then the effort was to become accepted or be accepted by the dominant culture, because if you're accepted by the dominant culture, then you could perhaps be treated.
Yeah. So it's like if I...
in a humane way.
Right. If I adhere to these certain standards,
Okay.
if I dress this way, if I walk this way, if I talk this way, if I adhere to these white, heteronormative, cisgendered standards, then America's institutions, social, political, and economic, at least the theory goes, will protect my rights and respect my rights. That's at least the idea that animates respectability politics. It's like this sort of quid pro quo. If I do this, if I do X, then you'll do Y.
Okay, but then my doing X is based on the standards that you've set.
That the dominant culture has said.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what I'm doing is I'm trying to live up to the standards of the dominant culture, white folk, so that I can be accepted and be treated fairly.
Yeah.
That's right? So it's almost as if I'm trying to earn the right to be treated in a humane kind of way.
Absolutely. Right, absolutely. That's you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
And where that ends up becoming a problem for many people is that there's always a thought of my rights shouldn't be up for not only negotiation, but for everyone else, they don't have to. The argument for many people is white people don't have to live by these same standards, right? They get to show up and be, and their rights are respected and they're protected.
But they've set the standard.
Right.
Right.
Now, for many African Americans that are trying to fight against respectability, that's their argument. That if it takes being perfect for people to care about a black kid getting shot in the street, for many people, like, how many of us are perfect? How many of us are, how many of us are perfect? How many of us have lived the life of a Boy Scout? Because that was one of the things my buddy, when Philando Castile was murdered in 2016, something that kind of animated my dissertation research was there were so many people saying this shouldn't have happened to him. He was a good man. He was a nice guy. He was a good husband, loving father, loving member of our community. And I never forget one of my best friends from childhood. He kind of says, well, do I have to, if I get killed by the cops, do I have to be a Boy Scout or Eagle Scout or some, great pillar of the community for me to matter? And so for many people, it's this sort of idea that respectability, if I have to be a perfect victim for my life to matter, for many people, the idea is that respectability, they believe respectability like further marginalizes people that are already in a marginalized in-group already.
Yeah, and almost to the fact, right? Regardless to who I am and where I come from, my life matters.
Absolutely.
And if indeed I am, let's tap into those who see themselves as Christian. perhaps some of the big issues that have floated around in recent weeks, right? There are those quote unquote standards that have been set by dominant communities. Okay, this is not supposed to happen, but anyway, I ain't perfect.
Yeah.
Those standards that are set by white communities, right? I think as we talk about the young man who was recently violently killed, but who said some terrible, horrible things about persons of color. All right? It doesn't matter if my dad is in the house or not. My humanity is to be respected regardless of that.
Yes.
Right? Because that's not something that just happens in black communities. Right. It also happens in white communities as well, right? But then the issue is that you having the dominant culture who are setting the standards, right? And I think from the reading, they talked about an out group and the in group, and the out group probably being more of that dominant culture, who is setting the standards and is the one whom we are trying to please, right?
Yep.
You going somewhere? I remember growing up. You know, you when you go, you want to look good, right? Because you don't want to make them white folk think you ain't got no clothes.
Yeah, that reminded my grandmother when I was 24 when I first started. When I taught my first college class, I was 24. And I'll never forget, I told my grandmother, I said, Gran, I'm going to teach a college class. And she said, well, baby, that's great. Do you have your clothes? And I immediately knew what she meant. I said, yes, ma'am, I do. She said, you have your shirt, your tie. And then she went through it all. Your shirt, your tie, your cufflinks. Do your shoes look good? Make sure they don't look run over. Remember, you know, don't embarrass this family now.
And that meant respectability because them other folk are looking at you.
Right.
Right.
Only black, one of the only African-American grad students there, probably, if not assuredly, the only black professor they're ever going to have, right? I have to present myself in the eyes of some of the students, probably gain their respect so they know I'm the person that's in charge here.
Okay.
Right. So it's always this sort of like impression management of proving yourself, proving you belong in every sort of room you walk into.
Okay.
Right. And that's the sort of like tactical respectability that you have to, there's a ways, like as some people would say, you just have to play the game sometimes.
Okay. Because if you don't play the game, what happens?
People say you're difficult. People say, you know, you're not, people might question if you're qualified.
Okay.
You know, so there are always some of those downsides to it. So one of the things I always kind of mention is that white males can dress up, white male professors can show up dressed however they want to. And like they can show up in a workout shirt, some old shorts, some shorts with holes in it, and some shoes with grass stains all over it and go and teach a class so no one would bat an eye. But if you or I showed up to teach a college course like that, if I showed up to the first day of class like that, they'd be like, who is this random black man in this room? Okay. Somebody might call security. Okay. Right. Now, the kicker of that is even if you are in a shirt, even if you are in a tie, someone still might not believe you're the professor. You know.
A great story. I have a friend. She retired now, a pediatrician. Would tell a story. She'd been in a hospital. A group of doctors talking. I think they wore blue jackets or something like that. She had on a blue jacket, but she was the only person of color, okay, the only black person in the group, and because of who she was, one of the head nurses came around and wanted to help her understand that she didn't belong in that group and she needed to get to work, and they had to straighten her out, right? But because of the color of her skin, she had achieved respectability. She'd earned the degree. She'd done the work. She's gotten the job. Yeah. She's done everything in the world to fit the criteria of respectability. in, or she should have, in the eyes of the dominant culture, white folk, right? Mm-hmm. But somewhere, even as you do all of those things that meets the criteria, you're right, you still can be bashed, denigrated, looked down upon.
It's still a losing, to me, it still ends up in a lot of ways being a losing battle. Mm-hmm. Because even if you show up dressed to the nines, looking as good as you can to try to prove you're the person that belongs at the front of this room, there still might be a student that first day of class, they walk into the classroom, look at you, look down at their class schedule, look back at you, look back at the room number, because in their heads, this can't possibly be the right room. This can't possibly be the right place. This, because their heads, and some of their heads, there's no possible way this black man is my professor. Okay. Right? So in a lot of ways, for me, I know at least like tactically in terms of the way I dress, like today I went and taught like this, right? Mm-hmm. A nice shirt, nice pair of jeans, one of my favorite new pairs of Jordans, right? And for me, this is like a little bit of a pushback because I still want to be comfortable. Sometimes wearing a shirt and a tie, man, those Stacey Adams shoes, man, those hurt at the end of the day, you know? Uh-huh.
And there are times, even in some of those arenas, you can dress down once you have met their standards of respectability. You're talking, okay, you're not that angry black man.
Yeah.
Okay? So not always is it the dress. Sometimes it's other kinds of things that we're always cautioned about. Plays itself out in a variety of ways. One, in order, well, most often, to get the dominant culture to embrace us and to allow us the ability, and I'm going to say, of how about allow us the possibility of upward mobility? And yeah,
like this like the idea of upward mobility, but I think for oftentimes for so many black people and black parents is just the ability to live your life, right, and not have something bad happen to you. So I know my father, you know, most people don't think of like the talk black fathers have with their black sons, and now likely their black daughters, about how to deal with like a police encounter. Right. There's, you know, I remember my father talking about roll down the window, 10 and 2, don't move. Yes, sir. No, sir. Hand, you know, only move when you are told you can. Tell them what you are reaching for. The whole thing. If they ask you to get out of the car, get out of the car. If they ask you to jump, ask how high. Right. And it kind of comes to this thing. I'll never forget when I was at Prairie View A&M University when Sandra Bland was stopped probably 200 feet after she had left the university for a job interview. And, you know, that video of her getting stopped and her ultimately getting arrested goes viral. And her big thing was, you know, the state trooper asked her to put out her cigarette. She's like, no, I'm in my car. I don't have to put the cigarette out. Right. And I remember being 19 years old, upset that that's what ended up getting her arrested. And my father, his big thing was, she should have put the cigarette out. And I'm like, why? She didn't have to. It's her car. What about asserting your, you know, some arguments that Sandra Bland was difficult. I always thought that she was simply asserting her dignity. Like, I don't have to be disrespected. And my father's ultimate point was, what good is your dignity if you're dead? Right? Put the cigarette out. To him at least, the thought was, she shouldn't be dead. But, you know, this is not a battle you fight right here on the side of the road. I want you to live, right? So put the cigarette out, and then we'll deal with this jerk of a cop later. But for him, the goal, something he always imparted on myself and my brother, was you live to, you move to, your goal is to survive the encounter. Right? And so that's like really tactical, very, very tactical. So there are so many different, layers to respectability politics, and they're not always rooted in inherent anti-blackness.
What do you mean when you say inherent anti-blackness?
So, one of the big proponents of, or utilizes of respectability politics, most famously or infamously ends up being Bill Cosby in the latter years of his public life, his.
That's the victim blaming piece that you're moving towards.
Mm-hmm. Some of the victim blaming, and there's always this argument that Cosby made about, the issues now aren't racism or the Klan or these other different things. The issues are us. We're having all these kids out of wedlock. We're sitting around in the liquor store drinking liquor, not going to school and dropping out of college and doing all these other sorts of things, right? The problem is us because we're lazy, we're this, we're that, we're doing all these things we shouldn't be doing, right? And so a lot of the work in respectability politics kind of focuses on this sort of the anti-black aspect of it.
Okay.
But the more tactical respectability of like black parents having to talk with their children.
Okay.
Is this much more of a everyday, just trying to
survive?
Yeah,
trying to survive on a daily basis, and that survival for many is how do I meet the standards of respectability as set by the dominant culture, right? Which becomes paramount. Also because it has other implications.
Yes.
That the dominant culture has set the standards, but they also use those standards against you. Not always is it just in a personal kind of way in terms of quote unquote upward mobility. But you talked about the group dynamics.
Yes.
Right? And so it's also a way that we can penalize.
Yes.
Or if you have met the standards of respectability, that we can offer in some ways a reward that allows them to begin to offer policies. I think in my reading they gave an example. I think it was Asians pre some sort of act where Asians were considered the model minority, right? And at one point they because they were the model minority and could live up to the standards of the dominant culture, believed in Christian or a higher power, believed in the values, didn't work for much, advocated for higher wages because it was going to hurt other folk, the dominant folk coming into the market. Only a decade later to change that standard, right? Legislatively, so that you now would not have to give them assistance to help them, right? So you can do those low wages because you know how to live on little, right? So that respectability politics also plays into the group dynamics because it's that which the power structure, white folk, who are setting the standards, can alter those standards to benefit them. Yeah. Sometimes making you believe that they're doing something good for you. But it's also a way to justify the harm that they do as well.
Yeah, and then because there's always this sort of holding up of Asian Americans as the model minority. So there's always, why can't you do this? Black people, why haven't you done this? Yes. Asian people started off at this place and they've achieved. Never mind the fact
that was your boy. That's what he touted in many of the videos that they showed, right?
And I would say never mind the fact that during Asian once they opened the borders up a bit more in the early to mid 1960s for more immigration from Asian countries, a lot, the disproportionate amount of those Asian immigrants were of higher socioeconomic status, extremely educated, right? So I always say the American government created this sort of model minority.
Because it was a myth.
Right, by who?
It was by whose standards.
Right.
It was a myth. It was not a true statement, and that all folk were not, all Asians were not that.
Absolutely.
But it was a myth that they were able to live into. And as they lived into it, but when the dominant culture, I won't say white folk, saw a way to change it because it would benefit them better, that standard was changed. Right? Mm-hmm. And that was part of that's the tactical piece. That's putting the respectability narrative into practice. Respectability politics is the action piece, the tactical piece that allows you to then do those kinds of things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There is something to be said as we talk about it, and we talk about it from a dominant group, because very much so it is a tactical piece. It is that action piece that still gives control to the dominant culture, right? But there's something to be said about in-group policing as well. So can you say a little bit maybe about in-group policing and what that's about?
Absolutely. Like that might look like. Sometimes there's this thought for some African Americans, like you see other black people being allowed in a public place or behaving what you consider to be inappropriately or in a way that might be embarrassing, saying something to that person, right? Like you are embarrassing black people by behaving like this, or sometimes policing the dress or attire of younger people or even, older people for that matter, policing the attire of women, right? Because, I think, you're a man of the cloth, right? We do this.
Yes, sir.
We do this in the church all the time. I've heard, my aunts see women come in to church, be like, she really showed up here wearing that. Mm-hmm. She gonna show up she wore it to the club last night. I know that, right? So there's a sort of in-group policing of not only women within the group, but the broader group as a whole. We police this sort of policing of each other because there's this inherent fear of, like, we'll police each other even when there aren't any white folks around.
Yeah.
Which is like, we're worried about black people looking bad and it's just us, right? We like that sort of thing of policing each other has become so imbued that we do it. Like someone says, I remember Mark Lamont Hill, he makes the point that white supremacy operates when aren't any white people around at all.
Okay, and I would say, it was an old movie and it was one of those crazy movies, but anyway, I forget, but it was the point. It's almost as if even within the community that you have those power structures and those power plays. Right? And some of that policing within the community almost plays into that. If I am of a certain quote unquote social status, if I have a certain income, it's the effort to want to attain or be seen as respectable by the dominant culture, and at the same time wanting to move away from the negative aspects or dimensions of those things that we see as negative, right? That then impacts our respectability we want to move away from. Right. Or we begin to stereotype. So actually, sometimes what we end up doing is that we subjugate ourselves better than white folk do.
Yeah.
In that in-house policing piece.
There's, oh man, I'm not sure how, you a big rap fan?
Huh?
You a big fan of rap music?
So not a lot, but go ahead.
All right, so I've always had this thought about, like, there's this long history of, like, respectability politics as it relates to black music as well. So if we, like, even go back and think about, like, Berry Gordy, Motown, right?
Okay.
And this sort of
etiquette Motown, camps. I know.
Right.
Motown's miss me.
Right. So, the etiquette camps, taking these people from inner city Detroit, some of them are from, the rural South, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, right? And teaching them how to eat with a fork at a table with a formal fork and a formal knife, how to speak with proper diction, right? All of that good stuff, right? Because you're trying to dress these people up to appear as upper middle class bourgeois Negroes, right? Okay. And so I've always thought that's primarily a lot of the presentation of black music from the 1960s and the 70s that went out into, the the world.
Okay.
You get the advent of rap music, and specifically gangster rap in the late 1980s going into the 1990s,
Okay.
Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, NWA.
Okay.
And those are the people that not only the civil rights movement has been trying to hide from you, these poor black people, these people who are confirming all of these negative stereotypes because they're rapping about violence, they're rapping about sex, they're rapping about doing drugs and all types of things. These are the people we didn't want anyone to see, right? And so, you know, a lot of the push, and I will say, you know, a lot of the push against the misogyny, well warranted, absolutely well warranted, right? But a lot of some of the push from Cedar Lawrence Tucker and others, I've always felt like was rooted in this respectability politics of these upper middle class African Americans looking down upon these poor black people from places like Los Angeles, places like New Orleans, Houston, Detroit, Philadelphia, Cleveland.
Just in East Austin off 12th Street years ago. Yeah. When they were sitting outside. So it may not have to go that far, right? Sometimes it's right here in our community as we're driving down the street. I think it's important that we understand respectability politics. It's important that we understand it from the dominant culture perspective because they set the standard. Yeah. And we're always trying to meet the standard. And want to come, I guess we'll do that in a minute. And it's always a standard that probably can't attain to, or that if the dominant culture decides to change that standard, they can do it at a whim. Yeah. And so even though we've met the standard, it still may not be to our benefit. Within our own communities, in our in-groups, that degradation that we see coming from white folk, we will heap on those that we see as marginalized with our own community because I'm not there, I'm driving maybe I do have a Bentley, certainly my Mercedes and the top of the line, and we can look through our noses at others who look just like me. And we're doing to ourselves what we see the dominant culture doing to us that we hate and that we reject and that we're working so hard to please.
And that's like, I read this book in grad school called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And one of the...
Yeah, it's Pablo Freire.
Yeah, and one of the lines in the book, it says, to be is to be like, and to be like is to be like the oppressor, right? And so like the only way...
One of the greatest fears too, right?
Like the only way to do this is to oppress other people, right? The only way, like if we can be on top, there's always going to be someone below us. So I always kind of say, as black men, it's hard being a black man, right? But as black, like in terms of dealing with, you know, racism, white supremacy, different things like that. But as black men, there are people that are on the, you know, totem pole on the societal hierarchies. They're black women. There are black LGBTQ women. There are black poor LGBTQ women, right? There are disabled people within that, right? People that are underneath, at least, you know, they not meeting this societal standard of white, rich, cisgendered, straight male, right? And so we reproduce that when we exclude gay people, right? We reproduce that when we thumb our noses at poor people, right? Yeah. We reproduce that. And so I think a lot of times some of the harms of respectability politics is that it remarginalizes, like it perpetuates the marginalization that's already within the community. Yeah,
I like that Pablo Freire. I think that it's the greatest fear is the fear that the oppressed will become the oppressor. And in many ways, we have been oppressed. But when we feel like we have reached and satisfied the dominant culture and we have reached that point of respectability and we're seeing what we believe to be upward mobility, we almost begin to oppress those within our own community that we see not as good as we are. something that as a people we ought to be cognizant of. There's a piece in that when they talk about moral binary.
Moral binaries.
Say more about that. You talked about Philando. But the converse of that, and I think you've mentioned, white folk can do the same thing, and will the same thing happen to them? So what is that whole piece about?
So for me, it's it's the big thought about like Black social movements have used the perfect victim or a sort of perfect victim as the face of their movement, right? I mentioned Rosa Parks a bit earlier, right? But
you said
Black political, like Black social
Okay.
movements, the civil rights movement most famously used respectability in terms of when they went to these marches, it was Sunday best. If you didn't have your shirt and your tie on, didn't have your Sunday best on, you knew you
were going to get beat up, but you had to dress because that was going to make you respectable, and they can see you. Hopefully, they will see your humanity. You become respectable enough.
And at least for Dr. King, the thought was he was very brilliant in using television because King knew this was going to be broadcast to the entire nation.
Okay.
And so for him, the idea is we're supposed to be animals. We're supposed to be violent. We're supposed to be criminals. And here we are dressed up in our Sunday best.
Wow.
Getting beaten
Dogs.
almost to death, getting dogs sicked on us, fire hoses, and we're just trying to register to vote. We're just trying to do these basic bare minimum things, right? Like that rights and privileges that were promised to all of us under the Constitution. But we're the animals. We're the violent ones. We're the criminals.
Right.
Look at us. Look at the way we're acting. Look at the way we're dressed, right? And kind of use respectability tactically. So like Black social movements have always done that.
Okay.
Now in the last 10 to 12 years, there's been a big push against Black social movements using this, right? Because the idea is, well, if I got to be perfect for my life to matter, who's perfect? If I've got to be perfect, if I've got to be, have a pristine criminal record or no sort of blemishes for my life to matter, whose would?
Yeah. So is that become maybe somewhat a generational piece between that generation who really worked hard, and that was became a part of the who-ness to some degree, right? And you now have a generation, and maybe even millennials can be part of that. I don't know. Okay, that group that says why, right?
Yes.
Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to go there? I think is my life,
Right.
and my being made in the imago Dei, in the image of Christ. That is enough, right? And so some of that pushback, I guess, is.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a generational thing. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the extreme significance of the Black church, because these views get produced and reproduced in Black communities, Black churches, Black fraternities.
So when you say extreme Black church, and that is the reproduction and not moving towards a new way of being and thinking?
So like, what I mean by that is like, in previous generations, there was like the Black church was like the focal point of like Black civil society.
Black life.
Right. Only place where Black people would
Center.
go without white people really listening. Right. And so that's
least
where.
Years after post-slavery, right?
Right.
Because for a long time, Master was going to be there to make sure that you weren't going to talk about any kinds of insurrections, right?
Right.
But at some point, you could be there.
Right. So
And you had the voice.
Post-emancipation, this is the one place where Black people could be and talk and have some sort of leadership and have some sort of agency without white people trying to, come in there.
Right.
Right. And so respectability comes out of the Black church and it's created in the Black church.
So you're saying the Black church taught black folk along with white folk how to be docile and meek and
I wouldn't say docile. I wouldn't say docile or meek. I would say the importance of presentation, right? The importance of every time you step out of the house, you got to look like somebody. No one, like I always think about my grandmothers, right? With things like this. My grandmother went to that church. She went to the store. She looked like something. I don't think I've ever seen my grandmother's knees in my life, right?
Okay.
Like she was always dressed to the nines, like a true Southern Black Baptist church woman, okay. Right? And the way you looked, it reflected not only on you, but on your entire family. Who let this child out the house looking like that? No one touched this boy's head. You know, it'd always be those different sorts of things. So
the look and the way you acted.
Right. The way you look, the way you act, all of it is so important, right? And so I think as that got reproduced over, the next several generations, I think these last generation or two, especially like with millennials, Gen Z, I think they're calling this next set of kids Generation Alpha. I think that's what they're called now.
That's the new term.
There's been there's been a much lower church attendance across the board has gone down across racial and ethnic groups, but also Black engagement in Black civil organizations, your fraternities and your sororities, that's gone down as well. And those are places where we imbue respectability. You were at HT for more than 30 years. I'm a proud graduate of Prairie View A&M University. Right? We imbue these things in these predominantly Black spaces, right?
So in these predominantly Black spaces, we have lent ourselves to respectability, to engaging in respectability politics. And that action piece is that it was so that you need to write and present yourself right so we can get the monies. And the monies is going to come from dominant cultures. But what you're saying is that it played out and it became a part of who we are?
Yep. I would say so. It became a huge part of who we are, to the point where I think most times when we mention the phrase respectability, once you explain to people, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is, right? But if you don't, it's always there in the corner, right? It's like I would almost say, like a painting or a lamp. It's there. And
so would you say that even with, I'm going to say late millennials, I'm going to say late millennials, right? And moving into Zs, that some of that pressure of respectability politics is still there?
I would say absolutely. Okay. That pressure is still there. It's even on very small things, right? Mm-hmm. It used to be what is considered professional dress, what is considered professional hairstyles, what's considered professional grooming in terms of like a beard. So I've got a beard. When I was gonna go look for a job, right? Some people suggested that trim it down a little bit. How much do you watch any professional basketball?
Yes.
So James Harden, right? Like I could grow this thing out really, 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 really long. But the suggestion was made, trim it down a nice bit. It helps, right? Sometimes for some people, it's the thought of like, people always say tattoos are unprofessional, right? But I've always said, or, having colored hair is unprofessional. But when I was in graduate school, I constantly saw white professors with tattoos. I constantly saw white professors with like purple hair or green hair or things like that.
And the market today oftentimes does not necessitate a coat and tie. Many professional companies, we can dress like we are now.
Yeah, it's changing, but I know I was always thinking, so the rules are always just going to be different for us. Because I told someone, I said, if I showed up with platinum blonde hair looking like Cisco from Drew Hill, he'll be like, what is wrong with this man?
Okay, but isn't that the goal of respectability politics? And especially as we look at it coming from a dominant culture, it's also a way of control. Because if you don't meet the standard, I can change it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And while blonde hair was okay yesterday,
it's not today.
As well as, because all the little white folk kids were doing it. Mm-hmm. When I see you doing it today we're going to change it.
Right.
All right. So that's also that piece where when we talk about respectability politics, we're also engaging in racist acts and forms of control by a dominant culture, because that dominant culture sets the standards, and that dominant culture can change those standards at whim. And when we buy into it, and I said when we buy into it and understanding the dynamics and that binary piece where if I do it, I might get my butt beat. If I do it, I might lose my job. If I do it, but now if Karen does it, she'll lose a job.
Right.
She might get a promotion. But they're going to be able to justify it because they're going to change the rules in the middle of the stream to keep you out. Mm-hmm. Right? And so what happens is you are constantly trying to meet a standard that's always moving and shifting.
The finish line is always moving back, which is why I've kind of told people, regardless of, the way you might present yourself, regardless of how you might talk, regardless of your diction, you're still black, right? And that's the key piece of all of this, right? Regardless of all of that, the racism is still going to be there.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask that question then, because I think it leads in it. Who wins when we engage in respectability politics? If it's from the out group, that being the dominant culture, white folk who are setting the standards, or if it be within the in group, when we still have those folk who deem themselves as having arrived and believe that they can look down their nose at others who are part of that same marginalized community, but you just see yourself a little bit higher and you're denigrating,
right,
or you're changing standards, or you're judging those beneath you. Mm-hmm. Who wins in either case?
So who wins are the people in power.
Okay.
Whoever's at the top of that pyramid. So if it's within the group, those folks who are at the top within group amongst, African Americans specifically within group, who wins are, frankly, African American, typically men that are of higher social class, that are straight and cisgendered, right? Everyone else who, again, within group, if you're gay, that cuts you out. If you're a woman, that cuts you out. If you're poor, that cuts you out. If you're, disabled, that cuts you out. It lessens the ability for you to speak on and have people hear you about what you're going through and the conditions that you face. Transgender people, right, are marginalized, right, and have their voices muted, right, in these types of conversations, because it's one of those things that's like, well, we don't want to talk about that. One of the things about black people is, we don't never want to air our dirty laundry, right? We always say, family business is family business. We don't talk, I never forget hearing somebody say, we argue, in-house conversations are in-house conversations. Publicly, we're gonna, present a united front, but we don't do that outside the house.
Right.
We handle stuff in-house, and there's certain stuff, handling it in-house a lot of times means we're not going to talk about a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
Right. Because there's always this fear of, if we let people know there are these other people over there, they're going to make us all look bad. So like one of the things about the AIDS crisis in the late 1980s going into the 1990s, right? And the reason why so many black civil rights leaders were reticent, if not completely unwilling to take it up as a black civil rights issue is because for so many of them, HIV and AIDS was considered a gay disease. At one point, it was referred to as gay cancer, right? And so for many in the Black community, their thought was, if we take up HIV/AIDS as a Black cause, not only because people view this as a disease that primarily impacts LGBTQ people, we're normalizing in their words, they felt like they would be normalizing deviant conduct and drug use, right? But people are dying in the midst of this. And so this is a huge problem that as a community, we're not taking up. Our brothers and sisters are dying and died, but because we're so worried about impression management, right, you're unwilling to take it up. You're unwilling to say, hey, our brothers and sisters are dying at a disproportionate rate from this disease and we need help. But because you're like, hey, this is going to confirm all the negative stereotypes dominant white culture has about us, about being, shiftless, about us being hypersexual and those things like that, we're going to kind of take a hands-off, a laissez-faire approach.
And part of it would, as we talk about the HIV and the AIDS crises, especially at its inceptions, I think that was in the early 80s, did maybe that some of that cue came from dominant culture? Because initially it was the dominant culture who took the hand off. The information that was fed to communities was fed through the dominant culture, who resisted and who saw it as something awful, right? And my take is that we still have a Black culture who's trying to move into and be respectable and pleasing the dominant culture. So the dominant culture mindset was that. So to do something different, not only was it alien and foreign, and even to the word of God, right? But and I'm going to go because I got to go Christian, but I'm going to also take that. It was also a white supremacist view of God's word that we even follow thin and still follow oftentimes, right? So in that AIDS crisis piece, that Black community stayed hands off. But I wonder sometimes if it was also part of that respectability politics that said, this is also what white folk believe.
Right. So I do think there's definitely a situation of like the reproduction of white supremacist norms and values there. Absolutely. So the idea of that, because broadly across the board in the 1980s and 90s, being gay was not nearly as accepted as it was then as it is now. I mean, there's still a lot of problems, but it's not nearly as acceptable socially now as it was then. So I definitely think there is some of that reproduction there. But I also think, like, for so many Black leaders, a lot of things are extremely strategic in that way of...
Yeah, but isn't that what respectability politics is?
Oh, yeah.
It's not done haphazardly.
Yeah, it's always...
Anyway, it's intentional, it's strategic. And part of that, who wins, you said the dominant culture wins, or the person in power is what you said, right? The person who has the perceived power is the winner.
Whatever that dynamic is.
Whatever that dynamic is. Because if we say that the in-group, that's going to be in that in-group that is all African-American or Asian, but for us in this context, all African-American, that power structure who controls, right? Oftentimes that's intentional. And definitely from dominant culture. Definitely those who are in power and have the power to set the rules, the guidelines, legislation. I can give or I can withhold, right? That's that control piece. And in the midst of that, that's why those who are marginalized can never win. Because at any point, those who are in control, the dominant culture, right? The dominant power broker, right? Can always change the standard, move the parameters as they see fit. So you in essence, never really become respectable.
Right. Oh man. When Wile E. Coyote was chasing the Roadrunner, kind of like you can never catch him.
Okay.
You're never going to be able to catch him. Right? Like I think in all my years of watching cartoons, I think Wile E. Coyote might have caught him once. And that was just like pure luck. Right? But you're never, if being black and trying to, emulate the cultural values and standards of white people, it'll never fully, you can try your absolute best, but it'll never fully work because.
And those black folk, and I guess for me, equally as important is that power play by the dominant culture, white folk, is that power play within the community, that in group with the haves, who play that same kind of game, just within the community, right? And again, those who, because they have power, they can always change the rules of the game. They can always set another benchmark that you can never reach, but you're always striving to get there. So you're always becoming or in process, but you never get to the point of respectability.
Yeah, and that's something that wears you down eventually.
Okay, and maybe that moves us into our next piece. I think it was a piece that I read was the toxicity of vigilance, because somewhere, if I'm really trying to become respectable, that takes a lot of work, man.
Oh, yeah.
That takes a lot of work on a daily basis. That takes a lot of work. Who's gonna come at me today, white, who's gonna come at me for no reason on my job because I'm trying to get there? In my community, sometimes on our black jobs, in our black places, we do to folk in that community the same thing that white folk are doing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's a challenge, and that's hard to deal with that every day. It's hard to come out and still maybe go to a store and wonder who might follow me today and how do I need to conduct myself. It's hard to be a kid, a black kid. And I want to go out tonight and I may have a few drinks and I have to be worried about if I get stopped. And a white kid, if he gets stopped, might get a pat on the back or a little, you're not supposed to do that. Okay, now you need to get on, right? And I might end up in jail. That's hard, and you have to deal with that on a daily basis. The toxicity of vigilance. There are some health concerns that come with this. Is that not right?
Oh, yeah. So it's being black and being in a lot of professional spaces. They always talk about how, like, the level and the toll that it takes on you physiologically. And so having to, show up every day in the moment you get out of your car, the moment for some people, my father always says, the moment you walk out of your front door, you're on. And I know for me, walking out of my front door, shirt and tie some days, other days it's like this, but I have to be on, right? I have to be Dr. Goodwin. Now I can't be Alex today, right? I have to be Dr. Goodwin. I have to be, you're always worried about, all right, if I slip into, my grandmother used to call the vernacular, right? In public, in class, right? Or, the way that I look, the way that I sound, the way that I talk, all of it, you're constantly worried about. You're worrying that, what people think of you. Are people perceiving you? Do people perceive you as hostile if you're a black woman? Are people perceiving you as angry? In these sorts of different situations that can wear on you, that can, take a serious toll on you.
Does that also have the same kind of implication? I know you talk about the professional, the workplace. Our kids who've got to go to school with white teachers because you don't respond in the way that they think you ought to respond, you become a problem child. And now you have a problem. And probably we're going to put you in a special ed class and ain't nothing wrong with you. Yeah. But you have not reached their level of respectability.
Or at least not behaving the way that they think you should act.
And isn't that demonstrative to the same thing? Because now I have a standard and you're not meeting my standard.
And that's one of those things, I was like, oh man. As somebody who's lived through bits and pieces of some of that, right? It's always this thought of, it starts so young. It starts so young of having to deal with these things and realizing, we're judged by different standards.
Okay.
One child might write on a desk and it's, he's doodling carelessly. It's no big deal, right? A black child does that. He's defacing school property, right?
And you got to go to the office now.
Right. Now you're going to the office,
You're
right?
in trouble.
Do
the same thing.
A pushing and shoving match between second and third graders,
Okay.
makes it, is no big deal, right? But the group of black kids involved, all of a sudden, they'll make it sound like it was a gang fight on the playground. It's 8-year-old boys, 9-year-old boys.
So the toxicity of that, because that means that you are struggling with that sometimes. From childhood?
I'd say so. Very.
Sometimes to death. And so the kind of health problems, you mentioned the physiological, you say the physiological, there's the psychological, the emotional, right? Things that are not considered. Is that right? Where if we see a certain behavior from a white kid, he has some problems and we need to just, if it's a black kid, he's misbehaving and he ain't got no home training.
Right.
Right? And to be tasked with that. That brings along depression, right? Other mental health disease, as well as the physiological, the physical. All of that begins to breed into it. Is that right?
Yeah, and it weighs on you so much. And I'm thinking back for me on like my first year of graduate school. I was 22 years old. I was the only African American male in my program. I was fresh out of Legion Prairie A&M University, and I am surrounded by white people. Okay. And I'm struggling with some of these statistics courses, and I think I'm worried that first year that I'm not gonna end up coming back. I'm worried that they're gonna put me out. But I'm not only worried about myself, I'm now aware that first year that, there hadn't been a black male, African-American male graduate from that PhD program since 2004.
Okay.
When I finished the program in 2023, I was the first African-American male to finish that PhD program with a PhD in political science in nearly 2 decades. So in my head, I'm carrying that with me. I'm carrying with me the fact that there hadn't been a black PhD in this program in almost 20 years by that point.
Right.
When's the next time they'll bring in a black student? I'm also carrying with me being from a historically black university. If not only mine, but all 105 HBCUs, if I fail, the next time a black student from a historically black university applies to this program, they'll think about the one time. Remember that time a couple years ago, that kid from Prairie View, from that historically black university, he couldn't cut the mustard. This kid, whoever this kid is, probably wouldn't either. And so remember that first year, it weighed on me so heavily, because for me, it's this, because we already know what they think about our schools anyway. They already think we don't do nothing but drink and party and have homecoming. That's all they think we do anyway, right? People already think our schools are less than.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to prove that, we can play with the big boys. It don't matter where. We're just as good, if not more so, than anyone else. And so for me, I'm feeling like I'm not only I'd be letting myself down, but I'd be letting down and failing other people that came after me. And so that wore me down for a while.
So is there some validity to in group respectability politics?
Should we do it?
Yes. You just stated the pressure of being in a doctoral program at now a PWI when I have graduated from an HBCU. I now have to uphold a standard because I'm the only student of color, the only African American who's a part of this program. And if I fail, it's going to have an impact on my in-group, right? It's going to have an impact on my in-group. So now I have a responsibility to uphold and engage in this respectability politic bullcrap because there is something that's valid about my having to uphold the respect of black folk.
Right, like you're carrying the race on your back. It's what it's one of those.
So is that valid as we engage in respectability politics?
I don't think we should. I don't think anybody should have to carry that much weight. Because that's a lot to put on. That's a lot to put on a person or a small group of people to be some sort of representative for
everybody.
Right, for the race. I'm the avatar for blackness or HBCUs here. Like that's a lot to put on a person. Now, it's understandable how someone could come to carry that. Right? It's understandable how that happens given whatever the dynamics are in a given situation. Right? But I don't think we should have to carry that, right? Because
and I think it's valid, right? We're all different.
Yeah.
Just because we're black don't mean we all the same. Right? We come from different parts of the country. Our families are from different places and different spaces, and they all do things differently. I can't uphold, and I can't speak for every black person.
Yeah, we're not monolithic.
We're not monolithic. And I think the answer is yes. But I'd like to talk about a little bit about how the question would be: is respectability politics still being played out today? It's what does it look like economically, politically, educationally? Yeah, I want to start there because then I have another question that I want to be a bit more direct and speak to. But is it still being played out today? What does it look like? I think the answer is yes.
Oh, absolutely.
So if we can start with the answer is yes. What does that look like?
So
as it is being played out today.
So politically, it reflects itself in a lot of black people's support for certain public policies. So some really good research by Hakeem Jefferson. He did some work, his dissertation, and also he published an article in one of the top political science journals. One of the things that he found was that African Americans that subscribed to respectability politics, they were more likely to support policies that disproportionately harm black communities. So support for sagging pants fines, support for the death penalty, support for welfare work requirements, those different sorts of things. Me and some of the research that I've done, my dissertation, I found that support for respectability politics was a predictor for lack of support for Black Lives Matter and black victims of police violence. Article myself and my co-author Tony Carey authored that's in Political Behavior. We found that support for respectability politics is a predictor of lack of support for defunding the police, right? So respectability definitely has a impact on black people's policy preferences and orientations. I think.
So it sounds like you're saying some of those policy preferences and orientations are policies that I hear you say that adversely affect black community.
That harm black people. That have harmed black people.
So again, sometimes we don't have to wait for white folk to harm us. We harm ourselves.
Yes. You kind of turn it inward, right? And that's, one of the things that for respectability politics for me is so fascinating, that this tool that was meant to help, right, starts off with black church-going women in the South as a way to defy these negative stereotypes about the group. Now, at least in some version of it, is being used to hurt other black people. Okay. Right. And so for me, that's one of the ways that it's so fascinating.
So vile.
It's
right. Vile.
Right.
Yeah, I can find another word for it.
Right. So as the political scientist in me is on a very sort of research level, this is interesting. But for me, I'm like, this hurts us. Hey guys, we probably shouldn't be doing this.
Okay.
At least not in this way.
So it's part of that from a Christian perspective, and I'm going to go from a white Christian perspective. Oftentimes it's about me.
Right.
It's about my salvation. It's oftentimes so individualistic. It's about my healing. Yes. It's about my bills getting paid, and we don't move in the sphere of the collective, right, of the group, right? And so somewhere, in order for it to benefit community, we've got to move out of self.
Right.
And yes, we want all of these nice things, but I ought not just want it for me. I need to want it for my community, because that means it begins then to impact my children who come after me, my grandchildren, my great-grand who come after me. Some of my greatest fears are for my great nieces and nephews and their children, as I look at the world that we're living in today, right? So if the concern becomes about me, what happens to them? That it needs to be broader and more far-reaching than that. To me, it says that our work then is double. That we've got to do something to break that stuff that we've learned,
right, from
dominant culture. That we've now taken that we despise from the dominant culture, but now we proliferate it, or we engage it within our in-group, right, and we're hurting each other, right? As we look at the in-group, also want to look at the out-group. And right, for just a moment, I'm going to say, do you think Donald Trump and his administration are engaging in respectability politics in such a way that they are seeking to expand poverty, decrease the middle class, and decrease the upper class? Man, no other time to folk. Okay, did you get that? Do you think Donald Trump and his administration are engaging in respectability politics in such a way that they are seeking to expand poverty, to decrease the middle class, to decrease what we know as the upper class, so that the American people, that's going to be i.e. black folk, can then become inextricably dependent on that 1%?
I wouldn't say that Trump is engaging in respectability politics. He's just engaging in good old-fashioned racism. So,
okay, but isn't that respectability? I mean, and even when we do it to ourselves, that doesn't extract the racism dimension that comes within our own community.
Right. So racism undergirds racism in white supremacist ideologies undergird respectability politics, but respectability politics, as a lot of scholars kind of talk about, is like an in-group phenomenon. Okay. So you're not looking at the dominant, right, culture who sets the rules and standards. Right. So the rules and standards are set by this dominant culture.
Yeah.
But this marginalized group is reinforcing those and enforcing those. So amongst women, respectability politics might look something to the effect of policing the way other women dress, policing. So if, let's say, a woman was a victim of sexual violence, it kind of goes to this, the victim blaming aspect of it is, well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? Right? Or people saying something to the effect of alluding to a woman's alleged sexual promiscuity, right? To try to justify why this thing happened. Right. So because respectability operates really, of course, there are these dominant standards set by the dominant culture. If we're talking about gender, we're talking about things like misogyny and patriarchy. And then with respectability politics as it relates to within women, it's women reproducing that and policing other women. With African Americans, it's African Americans taking these standards and then reproducing that within the group. So I would say Trump himself is just practicing good old-fashioned racism with his policies.
So he's not trying to engage in it from respectability place.
I don't think he's sophisticated enough to do it.
Okay. Do you see those who, I don't want to say his cronies.
Okay.
Do you see his cronies who will be on a TV show and as they are talking on CNN, NBC, and you're talking about what's happening to black folk, and all of a sudden it's, well, if they're engaging in this kind of behavior, then yes. Is that part of that is respectability politics?
It goes right along with the idea. It goes right along with that with that idea. I will say there are some elements, I wouldn't necessarily call it respectability politics.
Okay.
So you familiar with David Duke?
Yes.
So
yes.
David Duke, for the listeners that may not, and your viewers that may not know, David Duke was the former Grand Wizard of the KKK, who ultimately starts running for public office in Louisiana, runs for, I believe, state office, ultimately ends up running for governor, and he almost won. And one of the things about David Duke was that, the Klansman took off the robe and put on a suit. And once he puts on a suit, he kind of, in some ways, because he puts on a $3,000 Tom Ford suit, all of a sudden now we have to bat this person's ideas around and not act like this person is a Klansman, right? Okay. It's this sort of idea of this sort of allusion to this sort of, in some ways, for lack of a better term, respectability, right? This attempt to appear as for some people would say, a serious person, right? Okay. Not a Klansman, right? I put on a suit and I say these exact same things. And all of a sudden, you're on Sally Jesse Raphael or Donahue or, Montel Williams, right? And people are actually, have to actually bat your ideas around, right? So I think there is some strategic uses of clothing, of verbiage, of attire. I just wouldn't call it respectability.
Okay. So because what I would say is that it's those same people who will also they take off their sheets, they walk out of the church, they'll hang somebody, they are sitting in government seats, and then they're going to go and pass legislature that are going to set a standard for you to abide by. That's going to justify they're hanging you because you weren't, I don't know, and I guess as I did some of the reading, I can hang you because you're not like me, you're not respectable. And the dominant culture determines who's respectable,
whose life matters,
and who's not respectable, whose life matters, and that, from what I've seen, seems like that's even in the political sphere. Because there are those judging, and I'm going to say that's even from a marginalized community's perspective when you have those persons, black Republicans. All right. So does that still not put it to where it can be down here, but it also goes all the way up, and somewhere. it affects us on all realms if we're not careful. The question that I wanted to sort of end with was going to be, how do we break the cycle, right? One of those that I saw was educate folk, that they need to know historically where racism comes from. They need to know historically where homophobia comes from, where all those isms, where they come from. They didn't come just within a community. They started way before that. Racism started with the inception of the Americas, and as they began to colonize, and as they saw black. And so we had a racist society from the very beginning, which bothers me when I hear white folks say, why do you always talk about racism? Because it's a part of the fabric of what this nation was built on.
Preach.
And if we don't understand it, if we don't know how to confront it, and somewhere because of the way it was structured and because it was in the dominant culture, white folk who set the standards, we've got to go back there. We've got to go back there because we've bought into it and we play the game. That allows us to be the in-group who's devastating ourselves. But we got it from somewhere, and some of it started with the church, right? How do we keep them nice and calm so that we don't have insurrections and those kinds of things? And so we begin to indoctrinate you, right? We begin to set a standard for you to go by. So we're going to give you Christianity, and we're not going to worry about you. We're going to change your focus, and that becomes, and over time, it's cool because we can buy into it, so we're not concerned about here and now. It's racist, right? At some point, for me, that's I don't know. I could be very, very wrong, but as just the pieces that I've researched preparing for this evening. There's the out group and there's the in group, and they both matter.
Absolutely.
They both have impact, and the greatest impact is the one who's making the rules in significant places. That's white folk. Just from I didn't do a deep study, right? But I did spend a few days and highlighted and underlined and went back and read three or four times. But would offer, and again, that in-group dynamic I think is important, and that's the piece that really drew me, because somewhere, as a people of color, as African Americans, as black folk, we've got to see what we're doing to each other, right? And somewhere we've got to stop that because we've got to band together to begin to do those kinds of things that's going to stop the dominant culture who's setting the rules and the standards and who can change them at a whim. And what we do is we comply, right? We try to meet that standard, and in our compliance, we never become respectable because they'll change it. And within, we're doing some of the same games.
We'll never reach, at least for me, my thought is, it starts with, I think, for any marginalized group, realizing that we're not free until all of us are free, right? In whatever subset of whatever that group looks like, right? As black people, we won't all be free until black women are treated equitably and with respect, until our gay brothers and sisters and transgender brothers and sisters are treated with equity, love, care, and respect, right? Until our poor brothers and poor sisters are treated with respect and care and equity, and on down the line. And so the first thing I think for me would be like realizing that, right? Okay. That there's always, the world doesn't have to look as it is, right? There doesn't have to always be someone that at least to me, it might be a bit idealistic, on the bottom of our totem pole, right? There's a possibility we can create a world where all of us can succeed. And I think for African Americans, it's dismantling these systems of racism.
Okay.
It's dismantling white supremacy and fighting against it
Okay.
every single day, day in, day out. Like that's how, to me at least, by, fighting racism and white supremacy and some of these ideas that we have about what it means to be professional, what it means to be proper, what it means to be,
Okay.
all those different sorts of things. I think once we start to push, once we collectively push, and those of us that have certain measures of privilege, as personally, as a man, as a straight man, as a cisgendered male, comes from an upper middle class family, right? Fighting for Black women, fighting for LGBTQ, transgender people, right? Fighting for poor people, fighting for disabled people, right? And using your privilege to help others, right? I think that's extremely important and would help, right? Because at the end of the day, the first thing they're going to see is that we're all Black first.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Can I read a couple of these?
Absolutely.
Just in terms of looking at potentially, and tell me what you think about them.
Okay.
Something that might be maybe concrete. It says, combating respectability politics, reject acceptance by the dominant group as the end goal or any goal at all.
I would, that absolutely. I would say one of the things is you have to go be you every single day, whatever that looks like. Because for some of us, it is, put on a shirt and a tie every day, right?
And if that's you, it's okay.
Right. And if that's you,
if
that's
it's
cool.
authentically you.
Right. If that's authentically you. Right. Sometimes for me, some days that's me. Other days, this is me. Right. But showing up as, I always say we're not 100% ourselves when we go to work. Right. But, because there's a self at home, there's a self at work, there's a self with your mom. Right. But,
I'm sometimes bothered by when someone sees you and acting in a certain way. Sometimes you're fake. No, I'm not fake.
No.
This is who I am in this environment.
Right.
Right. And I'm not the same. I'm not going to be the same with my parents as I am maybe with close friends.
Right. And it's always.
Right? So I'm going to act differently depending on where I am and who I'm with.
Right.
It's not being fake. It's the relationship that we have.
Right.
Determines how we conduct ourselves.
Right. But you're right. So even in that, I feel like there is space for us. Like as Black people, we have to make space for ourselves.
Okay.
Because white people won't. These institutions won't inherently make space for us. We have to, they always say sometimes it's like sticking a square peg in a round hole, right? With Black people, we're not the circle, right? We're the square. Society has made us this sort of square, right? And so by trying to fit into that proverbial round hole, we never will, right? So it's always, I was reading Souls of Black Folk for my Black Politics class, and W.E.B. Du Bois in chapter 1 asked, what does it mean to be a problem, right? For this society, we are, for all of America's great grand ideas of all men are created equal and things like that. Here we are off in the corner saying, well, what about us? Right. And so for us, I think authentically showing up as who we are as best as we can day in and day out dispels some of that.
Okay. And I think I would like to think that means doing that and rejecting how you define me and what you expect of me in terms of what it means to be respectable. You can't define for me what respectability is. That's not a standard that you set that I have to abide by. Okay. Can I try another one or two?
Sure.
Recognize that current acceptance by the dominant group does not guarantee your safety.
Right. That acceptance is always conditional. Right. That acceptance is, the moment you start to say or do something that they don't like, you can be up out of here. Right. knowing that acceptance isn't, that acceptance is always based on, that can always change, right? I always think about, there are a number of examples, but like Colin Kaepernick, right? That acceptance is this role that we assign you to play. Athlete, you run, you jump, you score, right? But if you start to speak, if you have thoughts about world affairs, if you have thoughts about these different sorts of things, that's not what we're here for. That's not what we have asked you to do.
Yeah, and is it not that our call to counter that, right? Because when we fail to counter it, we are agreeing with them that I have to earn your respectability, right? It's almost, and from what I saw in terms of respectability politics, it's almost as if you have to earn.
Right, you have to earn your constitutional rights. Yeah.
Right? I don't have to earn. You give it to me because I am, right? When I begin to adhere to, I'm giving credence to your domination, right?
Right.
And your standards. And your standards are not what I have to live up to in order to be accepted, right? Let's see, I mentioned the educate yourself on the history of prejudices, and so I sort of mentioned that one. I think that's crucial, that we really understand where these isms come from, and including all the isms, racism, and I think I included homophobia and the many others that are clamped in there, to understand it, so that we can really stand firm where we are and understanding why I don't have to, and let me help you understand some things.
Mm-hmm. Right? I think one of the things that, like, our society as a whole, and this goes from K through 12 all the way on up, people need to have a much more comprehensive education about the history of race in this country. I know that in the state of Texas, at least in terms of public school, it's almost illegal to use the word race because they'll say this is DEI, this is woke, or this is whatever, right? But so much of our current day state of affairs, socially, politically, economically, as a whole, not just African Americans, but all of us, we all need to understand how we got here as a collective, right? And how we got here only gets explained if we look back. And that looking back, it's uncomfortable. Looking back doesn't always make you feel good, right? I think of history in this sort of way of history is not meant to make you feel good. History is meant to tell you, here's how we got to this point. If so many people, I feel like, believe that history is supposed to make you feel proud to be an American or be proud to be a Texan or things like that.
Well, not everybody, right? Trump is taking slavery and everything else out of museums because it don't make him feel good.
Right. Don't make you feel good. And I'm always like, when we start talking about understanding, America's racial history and things like that, almost compared to working out. If you go work out, let's say you run, do you lift weights by chance? So, let's say you were...
Well, yes.
All right.
Every 9 minutes.
Okay, every blue moon, okay.
I'm working towards consistency right now.
Right.
Well, there's a time I was pretty consistent, but
right.
things have changed.
Like, let's say, for example, you're lifting weights, and the first time you're on the bench press, you put, 25, a 25 plate on each side, and you're doing all right. Then you put a 35 plate on each side, and then the moment you start to feel a little tightness here, all right, racket. The moment you start to feel a little bit of sweat here, all right, racket, it's time to go home. You'll never get strong like that, right? I feel like so often the moment white people, frankly, get uncomfortable talking about America's racial history, it's time to shut down. It's time to go home.
Yeah,
and
sometimes we get uncomfortable talking about America's racial history.
We do too. But I think if we've got to be able and willing to push through that discomfort and understanding how white supremacy is some of the essential tree roots that it's the essential roots of how this country was built in every single institution. In order to understand that, that's not fun. I'll be honest, in order to teach that to undergraduate students, like, not a whole lot of levity there.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a job that needs to be done because, at least for me, I want to create a world with not only more well-informed citizens, but citizens that young people that want to go out and hopefully make this a better world for their grandchildren and people that, you know, they'll never meet and they'll never see.
Okay. Last one.
Sure.
And I think to do this one, actively engage when others use respectability politics as an excuse for harm or inaction by challenging and revealing their baseline prejudices. One, you're going to have to know what respectability politics is and how it works. I think to do that in order to recognize it.
All right. I'd say absolutely. Like, that's one of those things, like, you have to, like, nip it in the bud early or as quick as you possibly can. Right. So I've got nieces and nephews, right? You know, with a small child, you know, when they start to, you know, sometimes when they're 2, 3, 4, they're testing boundaries, they're doing those different sorts of things, seeing what they can get away with.
Yeah.
Right. What mom and dad and other adults around them will, you know, what's permissible. Okay. Right. So they'll push those boundaries. They'll push those boundaries. These are, you know, and you'll see like, you don't say that to your grandmother. You don't say that to your mother. Say, I'm sorry, right? Get yourself together. Go sit in time out, right? There's those different types of things, right? But I think also as a community, when we talk about respectability, is we've got to call that out, right? Okay. You know, we've lost shame, right? As a country collectively, like shame is no longer a thing.
Wow.
Right. So we've got to be able to bring back a place where we need to be able to hold other members of the group accountable, right? Shame and accountability are effectively, I don't want to say lost arts, but for lack of a better term, it's a lost art, right? It's something that is not nearly as impactful, but holding people that you're in community with accountable when they utilize respectability politics to marginalize other members of the group, right? And letting them know like, hey, this is harmful. This isn't helpful. I know maybe you think you're helping, because some people really think they're coming from a good place, right? In certain situations, right? But more than likely, they're using respectability politics to excuse some mistreatment that this person has endured. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know. We have to talk offline because I'm gonna have to be convinced, because I still I think that's critical. It's critical in the in group, and it's most critical in the out group. The white folk who is setting standards, establishing rules and guidelines, and passing legislation. We'd call it out there, and we need to call it out in our in groups.
Oh, absolutely.
Within the African American community. While we fight to keep white folk from hurting us, we've got to stop hurting ourselves.
Absolutely.
Just me.
Oh, no, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
That's where it's for us, Dr. Alexander Goodwin, my new friend.
Absolutely.
From Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas.
Yes, sir.
Keeping students straight and educating them.
I'm doing what I can.
Respectability politics, so that we can create a better world for all of us. So that's where it's for us, man.
If you're a prospective student looking to go to a great university,
HT!
Shout out to the home team. I always will say.
All right. Look, go ahead. I didn't mean to rain on your parade, my brother. But when you said that, I just had to throw it out there, you know?
I got family that are like HT all the way. Shout out to the home.
Go ahead. Go.
I always say shout out to the home team. But if you're a young student and you're interested in learning more about respectability politics, the history of race in American society, I'm also next semester teaching a class called Hip Hop and Mass Incarceration. If that interests you, Georgetown, almost at Georgetown University, Georgetown, Texas, Southwestern University, come holla at me. I'm there.
All right. Sounds like you're teaching some interesting classes. Some classes that I think all students can benefit from. I think as we talk about those classes, it's not something only for us. in our community, it's something that white folk must learn.
Oh yeah, most of those
Right.
classes that I've got, those black politics classes, those race classes.
That's also the makeup of the institution.
That is.
It is a PWI in good stead.
I will say that's one of those things where sometimes I get a little worried. I'm like, I'm teaching, it's a black politics class. There's only 2 black people in here. How's this going to go? Right. But if I always say, if you're willing to engage with the material and you're willing to learn and you're willing to, do some deep questioning and some, deep unpacking of biases, stereotypes, and questioning these systems that we have, I'm the professor for you.
Yeah, and it's called learning. I think if we're talking about tearing down walls, if we're talking about respectability politics from an out-group perspective, dominant culture, white folk, to truly understand the harm that's being done. I think in today's realm, as I sit, and I always say, Abby Phillips is my girl, but as I sit at the table sometimes, and it's one particular brother on there that gets me, and I declare
I think I know who you're talking about.
that he is top-notch racist, and it's wrapped in respectability politics because he tries to frame it in the right kind of way, but when he ends up, it's a racist act and racist conversation.
I'm 98% sure who you're talking about.
And so it's important that we engage it on that level. I think Trump is outright racist, but some of them who are his proteges, his whatever, we're going to keep it nice, whatever, are engaging in respectability politics because they're trying to wrap it up so that white folk get it and so black folk understand that you really do still have a place. Respectability politics, when I see a president from Africa, and he has mistreated all presidents. But in this one instance, and he's talking to an African president, and he only gives credence when a white man from Africa talks. I also see it when media says, and they talk about all of the presidents that have been disrespected by this president, and they mention all of them but the African president. We got work to do. On the out-group, and we got a whole lot of work to do on the in-group because we do more harm to ourselves sometimes than they could ever do.